Good evening. Can you all hear me? How is everyone doing tonight? Yay. It's so wonderful to have you here, and thank you for coming to this Met Talk on the Hours, which will have its operatic world premiere in 2 weeks' time exactly. Now, normally, our general manager, Peter Gelb, hosts these talks, and as you can see, I am not Peter Gelb. I am not Peter Gelb. I am Deborah Lou Harder. I'm the relatively new radio host and voice of the Met, and it's my great honor to be on this stage with such a star-studded, brilliant cast of artists. It's just megawatt. And they're going to share some light on the opera that we're all eager to hear. Now, before I introduce the panelists, I thought it would be helpful if I give a mini synopsis like I do on the air about the Hours. Would that be helpful to you? Okay. So The Hours, written by Kevin Putz, composer, and Greg Pierce, librettist, is based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by Michael Cunningham. I brought a little prop so you can see it. Many of you have read this wonderful book and seen the Oscar-winning film that came after it. So basically, this story is about 3 women in 3 different time periods who are connected in some way to Virginia Woolf's novel, Mrs. Dalloway. We have Virginia Woolf herself, sung by Joyce DiDonato. And her time period is 1920s, a suburb of London, as she's writing the novel, Mrs. Dalloway, and struggling with some pretty severe inner demons. Then we fast forward another 20 or so years to meet Laura Brown in Los Angeles in 1949. She's sung by Kelly O'Hara. And she is a lovely, very sensitive woman who feels utterly trapped in a marriage. She did not really want to be there, but she was sort of, I think, just went along with things and got married. She feels like an utter failure as a mother, and she reads Virginia Woolf to escape. Then finally, we fast forward another 50 years, and we are in New York City, this city, in 1999, Greenwich Village specifically, and we meet Clarissa Vaughn. She's a successful book editor, sung by Renee Fleming, and despite her outer trappings of success, there's a lot of longing and regret in her life. She has been in love since her teen years with the little boy of Laura Brown, actually, now grown up. He's a poet, Richard, who is literally balancing between life and death from AIDS. So that's the story. It's a very emotional interior world, and we're going to find out how this wonderful story is turned into an opera. So we have a big cast of panelists here, and so that I get everybody's bona fides correct, I'm just going to read from this little paper and introduce everybody. First, to my left, is our composer whose first opera, Silent Night, won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize and whose work is performed around the world, including his recent orchestral song cycle written for Renee Fleming, The Brightness of Light. Please welcome composer Kevin Putz. Next to Kevin, our librettist, whose opera Fellow Travelers and whose musicals and plays have been performed to acclaim, including right next door at Lincoln Center Theater. Please welcome playwright Greg Pierce. Our 3 incredible singers, they're all multi-award winners and honorees. Let's start with Virginia Woolf over there. Our mezzo-soprano singing the role of Virginia Woolf. Since her Met debut as Cherubino in 2005, she's gone on to sing over 100 performances with the company, most recently in the title role of Handel's Agrippina. She's performing on opera and concert stages and in innovative recitals around the world. Please welcome mezzo-soprano Joyce DiDonato. Next to Joyce, our soprano singing the role of Laura Brown. She is a superstar of the Broadway stage, winner of the Tony Award for The King and I, and in 2018 lit up the Met Opera stage as Despina in Così fan tutte. Please welcome soprano Kelly O'Hara. Finally, our soprano singing the role of Clarissa Vaughn, a legend of the music world. She has sung over 250 times at the Met, including many definitive title role performances. She continues to break new ground with creative, wide-ranging projects in music and beyond. Please welcome soprano Renee Fleming. Our director in the blue, hailing from across the pond, he's created and directed stunning productions for the Met, including Satyagraha, Così fan tutte, The Enchanted Island, and Akhenaten, and fresh off a London hit, please welcome English director Phelan McDermott. And last but definitely not least, a man who needs no introduction, music director of both the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Metropolitan Opera, a man who is a beloved guest around the world at so many of the world's great institutions of music, and who brings so much passion, brilliance, connection, and joy to everything he does. Please welcome music director Yannick Nézet-Séguin. Since we have a little Broadway stardom here, I thought it would be nice to start from the very beginning. A very good place to start. So I understand that it all began with you, Renee, that you loved The Hours as a film when it came out in 2002. And then in 2017, you were singing De Rosenkavalier, and that incredible finale, that trio of the 3 female leads, and you got a light bulb moment. Tell us how De Rosenkavalier connects to this opera, The Hours.
Well, Kevin and I had been discussing, it was his idea to let's talk about an opera, and I said, absolutely, that'd be great. So we were just spitballing titles and ideas, and Paul Betzel in my office mentioned The Hours, and I immediately said, what could be better? 3 leading female singers, everybody loves the trio in Rosenkavalier. And then there are also other spectacular characters, and it's an incredibly rich, relevant story on so many levels. So, and Kevin immediately agreed, and shockingly, Peter Gelb agreed. As a singer, when you bring an idea to a major house and a general director, you never expect them to say yes, So that was a lovely surprise.
I'm sure Peter, if he were here, would say, Renee, I always say yes to you. Well, Kevin puts, as we mentioned, you had written a beautiful song cycle for Renee, and based on letters of Georgia O'Keeffe?
That's right. Let's see, it goes back to the Eastman School of Music, actually, where Renee was a student for a couple of years, and I did actually 2 of my degrees at the Eastman School. It's a really wonderful school in Rochester. And they had the idea to commission an alumni composer to write a piece for an alumni performer that they wouldn't disclose, and I kind of had a feeling of who it might be. And so eventually we met, and they wanted to commission me to write a piece for their orchestra to play in New York when they were on tour, so a student orchestra. And Renee and I were talking about some ideas, and I think you had said, well, you could do some poems if you want, but I'd really like to think about, a character. I think that's sort of like an opera singer, like an American woman, a historical figure. And I found some quotes of Georgia O'Keeffe that were really beautiful and developed that. And then Renee had the idea to broaden that into a story about Stieglitz and O'Keeffe, which it's turned into a much bigger sort of multimedia piece. And so it started there, and then I had the idea of, why not ask Renee to,
I wonder how that conversation went.
It was pretty, well, it was at a reception, I think, and I was holding a glass of wine, and I think I said, if I ever wrote another opera, would you be in it? And Renee said, of course. So I was quite happy with that. And I think Renee actually wasn't just a thing that she said. Like, she really started thinking about what we would do, and then that's when the hours came up.
And how long ago was that, would you say?
5 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So Greg, you came on board as a wordsmith. What did you find exciting about adapting a great novel, really two great novels if you include Mrs. Dalloway, and a film? What excited you about adapting that to the world of opera?
I really loved the novel when I first read it, when it came out, and what I loved was especially so many things, but there's such a sense of mystery in the novel. Why are these three women in their lives, why are they connected, and in what ways? And it just felt like a really a beautiful novel to me, with a lot that's left unsaid, and there's just an awful lot to feel. And the range of emotion is just extraordinary. In a pretty short novel,
Yes.
There's just a lot going on with all three women. So I just thought the musical opportunities there were extraordinary.
There's a lot of poetry in this libretto. We're going to hear from the three ladies about their characters and their music in just a bit, but I thought we would turn now to our director, Phelim McDermott. Oh, excuse me, before we turn to Phelim, I just wanted to ask Yannick one thing. Yannick, when somebody comes to you with a new idea for an opera, are you always enthusiastic? Because you're really enthusiastic about a lot of things.
Really? Of course, it's a beautiful question, Nobody has ever included in the question how positive and enthusiastic I am. That doesn't mean I like everything,
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that when I believe in something, I want to love it, and I want to bring it to the finish line with all my heart. Now, I also think that to broaden the horizons of the Met and of opera in general, and realizing, which is my mission and my passion, along with Peter now, to really make the Met an important force, not only about being the best opera house in the world, but putting those resources, the best opera resources, from everyone in the company, behind creating new works, and be more in the locomotive of it at the front of the train, And that, for it, needs a lot of open mind. So when new ideas come, I think it's important to first say, what could be great about this? However, in this case, Renee believing in it, and this is something maybe Renee doesn't remember, and Kevin probably doesn't know. But right after, around this song cycle, we connected, I don't know how, somewhere, in a concert or something. And I remember so clearly, you said, if you ever want to, someone who writes for The Voice, I'm just singing, Kevin puts music, he writes for The Voice so beautifully, Yannick, if ever you want. I remember this, and that was before the opera. So and it's true. And I think these ladies can say it even better than I do. So what I mean is that in this case, I think so many ingredients were there to be enthusiastic and put all our resources forward, especially because this is, and that's what's very important, the Met has been doing last year 3 new operas. This year is doing more. When I say new operas, meaning recent operas. But this one is a world premiere. And it's a world premiere because I got Peter to agree to it, because he loves to have it done somewhere before, because it's always better the second time. He has a point. However, I got him to say, look, I want to be part of the birth of a piece. And I got him to do this because I said, let me do it first in Philadelphia as a concert. And it worked out perfectly this way. So that's why I'm already so enthusiastic about it.
Yes.
But yes, I mean, we don't accept, if that's your question, we have a fantastic program, Lincoln Center New Works, which have fostered the great new operas in the last decade. But of course, we don't bring everything on stage unless we really, truly believe in it.
Thank you. That was great to hear. and I just love your passion and your advocacy for new work. Phelan McDermott, just a few months ago, you just wowed us again with your production of Akhenaten, about the ancient Egyptian pharaoh. Now we're in the 20th century with this opera. 3 different time periods, 3 different protagonists, their lives taking place within a single day in this opera, and 3 different settings. That sounds really complex. Can you tell us how you made a cohesive narrative out of this story? And I think we have some visual aids to help us to tell you.
There we are. So, of course, our designer, Tom Pye, who designed Akhenaten as well, has been helping us with the puzzle, as it were. And I think, you know, the thing that you asking people how they got involved, first of all, I'm sure Peter won't mind me saying this, and Kevin and Greg won't mind me saying it. When Peter Gelb approached me about this project, he said, you know, I'm excited about maybe you being involved, Phelan, because some directors said this might be unstageable. So
It is true.
so I immediately got excited because, you know, what's amazing about, as Yannick was saying, what's amazing about this piece is, you know, we haven't made it yet. We're still making it. So that's kind of, you know, my experience of the opera world is that's unique. I've done some modern operas, and they're like, you know, they premiered 30 years ago. So to be in this process of finding out what a piece is and collaborating in a way is like, it's an extraordinary experience, because very often with opera, you have an idea that it's this thing that exists, that you have to kind of like do again, as it were. But we're in this process of discovering what this is. And of course, in this piece, we've got to jump between these different time periods. And Greg's done this amazing thing of distilling this novel into its essence. So very often that's about taking things out, of course, because there's that novel. It's a short novel, but it's too long for an opera. Mm-hmm. You have to take things out and kind of distill it to its essence. So you're distilling these 3 stories, and then these 3 stories have to weave themselves, as they do in the book, and rhyme with each other through the evening, and then join together at the end of the piece. So I guess in terms of like, when we were first talking about designing it, the opera hadn't been finished. You know, it was still being written. So in a way, we've given these 3 worlds. You know, you'll see on the stage there are 3. Actually, this is here. You're seeing Laura's world at the side here on the left, and then Virginia's room. So you'll see in the piece there are different atmospheres with the rooms, and they, like in the book, the set itself has to weave its way around, and it's like in a way it's like a kind of moving collage, or you know, so you know you see these different elements, but because the story is so complex and it weaves together, all these things have to move together. So Tom designed this set, and we knew that we would want an element that wove these things together. We've been working with Annie B. Parsons, amazing choreographer that some people may know, and she did the show American Utopia with David Byrne, her beautiful choreography. And using the dancers and using the chorus, these different worlds weave together, I would say, in the same way that Kevin's beautiful music does in weaving these stories together. So I guess we're drawing people in, and in a way, trying to clearly say, we're in this story now, we're in this story now, and we're using the dance and the set to guide people through this evening. And you don't want it to totally be, there is a kind of mystery in the show of how these stories relate to each other. And so you want to set these different stories off, and then people move between them, and sometimes you go, oh, that story rhymes with that story, But the end of the piece is this beautiful kind of confluence of these stories together. And I guess the dream of the show is that the set and the movement of the whole piece comes together in the same way it does musically in Kevin's beautiful, beautiful music. So there's the task, and we're still in the process. We've just left the rehearsal room, and we've been introducing the chorus into that. And the other challenge is that the chorus are an ever-present. They're an ever-presence throughout the whole piece as well. So they have to weave together. And maybe, perhaps different from other operas, it moves very quickly between these different scenes, more so than the 3-act opera where it opens and we're in this scene, then the second act is in this scene. We're like doing that in a really, I would say in a kind of more modern way. There's a vocabulary there which is these stories weaving together. So I guess the set and the dance is being used to invite people into that story.
And the genius of film is that he has also to stage, like you said, with your team, 3 operas at once, because weaving together also means, because of the way the opportunity that this opera is taking, is that, how did Michael Cunningham say when we met him briefly? He said, in a novel, even if you put things together, you are bound to the sequential.
Yes.
And in an opera, because people can sing together, some of it is superposed, right? So at this time, you have to stage the story, which I found amazing, how to stage it, but also sometimes keeping clarity and mystery while it's happening at the same time. It's remarkable.
I would say that's what's so exciting about this as a piece of opera, or as a piece of art, is that I find myself going, we could only do this in this way with opera. Film does it, but it has to cut. Has to cut between the scenes. You go here and then here. But we've got like all those 3 stories happening sort of simultaneously throughout the whole piece. So sometimes you're watching this story happening, but whilst that story is happening, another bit of the story is happening in a kind of another key, kind of another temperature at the other side of the stage. And you go, this maybe is that thing where you go, this is why we do opera, because it can only tell a story like this.
Were you
We
going to
think
jump
you'll
in?
all need to see it 8 times to be able to really grasp it.
So true.
So that was actually a very good model for the opera.
Yeah, so, a novel is linear, and often a film is too, but the grand stage of the Met and counterpoint, like a Bach fugue. You can tell a lot of stories and hear a lot of voices at the same time. Well, speaking of voices, we would love to hear from our 3 divas about your characters and about your music. I think it might make sense. Oh, did you want to keep talking about some of these set pieces? I'm sorry, I didn't know we were...
I just had never seen it, so I was
Yes.
And also, this is like this is probably from the tech, so that we don't. At this point we were looking at the set and seeing. So you can see these different worlds that we're creating, and Kelly's seeing what her room looks like when she's up in the, yeah.
I should just say, I mean, just
Yeah.
my feeling, when you see it in person with lighting and everything else, it's much more magical.
Yeah.
I mean, even than these pictures. I mean, it really is. And there's some other elements that aren't being shown here, right? With some projections and this beautiful sort of billowy curtain that, well, anyway.
Phelim, I'm thinking about Akhenaten. Will we have any skills ensembles?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. It's. I said, I got interested because it was. I was told it was maybe unstageable, but of course, I was also excited by, the opportunity to work with these amazing, amazing performers. But not only like you go, oh, I'll get to direct an opera, and I worked with Joyce before, I worked with Kelly before, but actually you go, that's like doing 3 operas at the same time with extraordinary, wonderful performers, and there's a strong feminine element to this story, and we talked about the dance element being this thing that wove through the whole piece. And in our concept, the dance element that Annie B and the choreography that she's bringing to it is like the subconscious. It's like the dreamland that connects these three women's stories. It's like that imagination. And so that's our skills ensemble. The skills ensemble are bringing the dreamland of this piece, which is a very strong element to the story, that characters in this piece are often slipping into dreamland. You know, Virginia's imagination is this, of course, dreamland, which gave us these extraordinary stories. And each of the characters slips into that world, and our dancers take us into that world in a visual way. So that's our skills ensemble. The beautiful dancers, yeah.
Wonderful. Now, we're going to speak with our singers about their characters and their music. I think it might make sense to go chronologically with your time period. So we'll start with the author herself. Joyce, what is it like to portray a literary genius?
I'm talking to Greg a lot, saying, what's it like to be a real literary? I mean, it's overwhelming, actually. And I'm finding in the course of this piece, and I predict that you all will have your own experience with this as well, it's quite unbearable in how profound the experience is of meeting this. I mean, we were in the Sitzprobe with the chorus for the first time, and they had been learning their music, and I was talking to a few of them the day before, and I said, y'all need to be ready because you don't know what this is. And they're like, oh, okay, so yeah. And then we're in the Sitzprobe, and they're right behind us, and all we heard was, and just tears, because it's nearly unbearable, because what I'm finding for myself is that it's true. And it is true at a really profound level. The reason it's bearable is because of the care that Kevin and Greg have put into this. You are in the best of hands because this music sort of holds you and says, I know, let it out. I know, but you have to feel this. And there's a part of me that goes, I'm not ready for that, I'm not ready. And the music goes, I've got you. And so I'm sorry, Kelly, I know you don't like to do this, but I can't help but imagine opening night. And you never know with a new piece, but there's something about me that knows, because again, this feels so true, is I think it's gonna be an immense cathartic, transportive, healing, sacred space, I think, for everybody that comes. And hopefully every show will feel that way, and every incarnation, may there be many, of this piece as it goes. So, of course, I'm thinking about Virginia. I've sung a few roles that are based on real-life people, and my way into that has always been through the score at hand. I don't feel like I would be successful if I was trying to put historic Mary Stuart or Sister Helen Prejean or Virginia Woolf, because then I would feel a little bit like a caricature or imitative. When the material is so strong as it is, I mean so strong, I'm in the world of the hours with Virginia, and I'm not thinking, oh, this is Virginia Woolf. And it's a woman who is a genius that I think she's frustrated. Very few people around her understand her, and they don't understand her process. And she is exhilarated and terrified by trying to find that first sentence. And it's like it's terrifying to her, full of self-doubt, but also so compelled. It is she has no choice. It was a spectacular thing that Phelim said the first day that we were staging this, and there's a huge opening scene with a lot of hustle and bustle, and it's a lot, and then all of a sudden the door opens and you're in another time. it goes from Washington Square to Virginia's study, and it's sort of claustrophobic and damp, British, English countryside. Ugh, I can smell the mold, you know. No offense, but it's just, that's the feeling of it. And you know that you're back in time. And she's trying this beautiful first scene of trying to remember and find and create that first sentence. And we were sort of dancing with it, and Phelim said, "Don't forget, without that first sentence, none of us are here." And I just thought that's true on so many levels. About every sentence that any one of us puts out into the universe has huge ripple effects. And Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, is one that puts us in this room tonight. And so my approach to it is really to mine every harmonic, gorgeous progression that Kevin has written, and the distillation and the purity that Greg has written in his words, and to just dive in that way. That's my entry point.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joyce. Kelly, your character, Laura Brown, is really stuck in a difficult place. She reads Virginia Woolf to escape. What does that reveal about her?
You know, I feel like I've played this woman before, again and again. Something's different this time. We've just come back out of lockdown. We've just come out of a pandemic. I'm a mother with smallish children. I stood behind my stove many a day, many a meal, 3 meals a day, which so much of me as a person personally love. So much of myself, I love that. I love that, being that kind of person for my family, for my children. But when we're talking about historical people or real people, she is the most real in this moment that I've ever really felt a person, whether it be part of my own mother, definitely we know part of Michael Cunningham's mother, a true story, but also so many women and men right after this pandemic, because we went into our deepest parts of our souls and we started talking to ourselves a little bit more creatively. We started having to be our own company again. We couldn't get lost in the hustle bustle. We couldn't get out and get busy and stop thinking, and we started thinking more deeply. And in some ways that really worked, and in some ways it was devastating. And one of the things I think about this piece for all 3 of us is that we're representative of something that is really permeating our air right now in our country and in the world. We're talking more about mental health. We're coming forward with fears and certain things we're thinking about. We're also, as a female society, thinking about our rights and different things. And I only bring that up because you go back to the 50s, and it feels like another time. It feels like something we've graduated from. And I don't know. And so I'm sitting there as Laura Brown. Now, Laura Brown makes choices that I would never make. And that's where an actor comes into play, right? But all of the things that she grapples with, and all of the doubts, and the hopes, and the disappearing, the delicious things she grabs onto, like literature. For me, it's working in this art form, working at all, for me, Kelly. But for Laura Brown, she goes into this place to disappear into someone else, or to actually feel found, to feel seen. It's not something she would definitely talk to her husband about. It's not something she's going to talk to her girlfriend about, her next door neighbor. So I feel like even though I've played her and gone back in time as an actor, it almost feels like I'm just sitting in the present moment and stewing in it just a little bit more deeply. And there's not a lot of work to be done, except then when you start to sing. then the real artistic challenge then starts to make you boil over with excitement and fear and adrenaline, and pushes you to the edge of what you hope or thought or maybe wondered if you could do. And so it's been the most brilliant time for me. But the truth of the character, and especially with the ease of Greg's libretto, the ease of the truth of the words, It just feels as natural as anything in the world right now, and not in a good way. And I'm proud to play it because we're going to talk about it.
Very interesting that your character, who seems so frail and unsure, at the end of the story, she's found a way to survive.
She has, and I think it's important to recognize that it might not be the way you would choose to survive or you would choose to survive. But I know, and I'm quoting the author himself, Michael, and the way, well, let me do that first, to say I'm not going to apologize for her choices because we need that as a society. No, that's not what some people do. They make the choices they need to make, and that's what Laura Brown does. However, within a few, maybe 2 sentences, Greg somehow, again, this wonderful distilled word, into something that actually makes for a life that was maybe understandable. He just gives me something at the end that just, there's purpose, there's gratitude, there's apology, there's everything inside it. And just in two sentences with a beautiful melody. And it's so fulfilling to have that to be a vessel for.
Renee, your character, Clarissa Vaughn, seems at the outset, as I mentioned, very successful and sure. And we were speaking yesterday that Virginia Woolf in the opera sings. It's something like, proud, common Clarissa will soldier on. She will not be the one to die. What can you tell us about your soldier, Clarissa?
Well, first of all, I'm just so excited to be playing a character in which I can wear clothes that I actually still own from the 90s. So, I mean, I've never been able to do that in my whole career. And but I just want to talk for just 1 minute about Kevin, because I'm not really known for this, but I've been deeply committed to new music my entire career and have always gone back and found the most joy in premieres and in learning new works and understanding what composers are and collaborating with composers, being able to talk to them about writing for the voice and what it takes, and can we collaborate on the text so that I can say something and sing something that feels relevant to me. And what is extraordinary, though, about this work is, and what I learned from my years of touring, I haven't actually sung very much opera since my children were little. I'm mostly concertizing around the world all the time, and what I've learned is that I want to make my audiences happy wherever I go, and that's by programming things that they would enjoy, that they will be able to absorb, giving them a way in, even if it's a difficult piece. And then looking for composers who actually have enormous craft, who have the ability to really write with extraordinary craft and skill, but who also have a bit of accessibility so that the audience can enjoy it. I want both. And so Kevin is like the poster child for this because the skill is off the charts. He's known to be a masterful orchestrator, so you will hear the orchestra used in really unusual and interesting ways. I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to say this about yourself, so I'm saying it. But he also, what I find extraordinary about this piece is in 2+ hours, the amount of new material and rich motives, the melodic material, all of this is just it's constantly new and fresh and unique. There are things I've never heard from any composer in my life in this piece, and lots of them, not just a couple. Then, top of Act 2 is this something that is so achingly beautiful, you can't, if I was sitting in the audience, I would be sobbing from the beauty of it. And yet, you never forget throughout the entire opera that the hours are ticking. He keeps this rhythmic motive. He comes back to the clocks. He comes back to some of the first storylines. He ties us together musically. I'm just saying this so it's another layer with which you can kind of experience the piece. And we've talked a lot about the story and fantastic libretto from Greg, but I'm telling you, I think the music is amazing. and beautiful. Okay, Clarissa, just briefly, briefly. Clarissa,
I don't want to stop you. No.
and he's given me this incredibly exuberant music for the whole, a big chunk of the beginning of the first act, and which really expresses her kind of, I'm going to make this happen. We're going to have a great party, and Richard is going to be happy, and he'll get a prize, and maybe he'll even get better, which is what she's in denial. She's in total denial for a long time, and the doubts come. It's really about regret. It's about, did I make the wrong choice at 19? Now, who makes the right choice at 19? But that's in the story. And am I with the right person? Am I living the right life? Is my life too safe? So it's, I just adore the fact that we rarely in opera get to play women who feel like real people with real issues that we have. And so this is one of those opportunities that is just like a breath of fresh air. And the dancers, it hasn't been said, are almost all women. So that really underlines the current and the emotional current of what it is that we're experiencing.
Can I just also say the orchestral writing, yeah, but the other thing that's blowing them away is the choral writing. I'm hearing the Met Orchestra, which we love and extraordinary, make sounds that I've never heard them make before in colors. Thank you, Maestro. And it's just, it's breathtaking how you employ the chorus to be in our heads or to provide atmosphere. I mean, that's the.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Write for
I've
chorus?
never heard you write for chorus before.
Well, you just have to stack the notes one after another, just like a. It's actually, I'm not. It sounds like I'm making a joke, but it's actually the way it works. You can mess around with it, but you just, a chord has like a fourth on the bottom and a third, another third. You just use all those notes. And they sing all those notes. It sounds good. So that's it. What?
It's the messing
There's
around
some
thing
messing
that you
around.
get
There's a little
right
messing.
and unique.
The seconds
So
again.
since we're talking about Kevin,
This is great.
Yes.
Kevin is also very, very quick to adapt everything to something that his needs. And this is the joy of working with living librettists and composers, is to have the resource to, of course, go and ask questions, what was in their mind, the things that we spend our life thinking with dead composers and librettists. That I wish I'm going to ask Verdi one day what he meant, and I hope it won't be tomorrow, but one day is someday, and then I even maybe in heaven or in hell, who knows. So, but now they are alive, and so, but also the adapting to everyone, because Kevin, you wrote having these fantastic women in mind, but what I wanted to say is the chorus. Maybe that's the thing that I saw you in Philadelphia once we did it, that you were maybe less happy with, but immediately we were rehearsing, and it was very quick in Philadelphia. It was 3 days, and I said, "Oh, choral writing. No, I know exactly. Oh, that is not." And how can you get it already so good in Philly, and how can you also get it a million times even better, just the second time by correcting it? So I mean, it's a gift.
Well, I know we have an agenda here, but I just have to thank all of you for these amazingly kind. I'm sort of trying to keep it together every day emotionally with this, but today is just another one of those days. But honestly, for me, the opportunity to do something on this stage and with these people inspires your best work, and it also inspires you not to procrastinate. So when you ask about, how did I get it right the first time? Because I didn't, I started well in advance, and I thought a lot about it. And it's wonderful to know that if I put all my energies into it, that I know I can pass it to the most remarkable musicians on the planet, and including the Met Orchestra and the chorus, and just. And feel completely taken care of in every aspect of the music, and then have things happen that I couldn't even imagine with the way that these ladies, phrase, and every phrase has a different color depending on the meaning of the text. I mean, it's just absolutely astounding.
We were so excited to hear it. I was so grateful to speak with Renee yesterday about this opera. She kindly came up to the radio booth between rehearsal and a gala she had to get to. And she said that creating a new opera is kind of like a miracle. Kevin and Greg, how does that ring true for both of you with this piece? Greg?
I mean, the miracle, part of the miracle for me in the last month, we really went into rehearsal with everybody, you know, in the last month, and it's all come together. But for years, because these things are planned way in advance, and so, you know, Kevin and I wrote, 4 years ago, we wrote the first draft, and it was me and Kevin and a lot of work with Paul Cremo, who is head of commissioning and a dramaturg at the Met, and it was really the three of us, an awful lot, just figuring out how to tell the story, rewriting, and when it's that intimate, the idea that someday there'll be 70 people on this stage, and you know this building will be coming in, and all these things, it feels so remote. And I'm a playwright by nature, and I write, you know, two-handers and three-hander, and you know, small, intimate chamber pieces. So to have something come alive on this scale is magical for me.
Kevin?
Well, it is kind of a miracle when you think of the humble beginnings of it. You know, I remember the first. You know, you really do start with nothing, and I mean, I think that's what's so fun about it. Really, I mean, let's face it, it's scary, but it's also why we do it. I mean, it's so fun not to know. You know, where will it go? And then it's sort of the piece gradually emerges. No, not just. I mean, as an opera, like we knew the story essentially, but we didn't quite know how it would end. Except we thought, I think we got to have these these three ladies on the stage together singing, and that's what everyone, let's face it, everyone wants to hear. But you know, not knowing was what made it so exciting, and discovering it as we went along. You know, and I remember one of the first things that Greg and I talked about was that I really didn't want this to be like a play that was sung. You know, I really wanted it to feel it had to be music. Like I wanted to invite music into every scene, so that you know. It felt like it just had to be this way, and that's what Greg did so beautifully. And I won't give away all the ways that music sort of happens. I mean, there's maybe I'll give away some of them actually. I mean, there are just some beautiful. You know, there's a man singing on a street corner, and that tune becomes pivotal in the show. There are three kids who they sing this chorus in Greek, and you don't know what it is. You think it's the voices in Richard's head, and only in Act 2 do you realize that these are the nephews and nieces of Virginia Woolf, and they're holding a funeral for a dead bird. But that music is placed early in the opera, and so there's so many ways that music just had to be in this piece, thanks to Greg, and I know we'll work on other operas, and I hope we work on many operas together.
Thank you. Phelim, we've heard that this motif of time, the chimes that Kevin has put into the opera that recur, and also you hear that in Mrs. Dalloway in Virginia Woolf's novel. She says something like leaden circles dissolving in the air when she's talking about Big Ben in London. Could you just reflect on the hours of this work?
You know what? One of the things I've not been doing operas that long. It's about 15 years now. Still feels like the beginning. One of the things that I've discovered about opera, which is maybe unique about it, is it can change our sense of time. It can take the audience into this different perception of time. I mean, many other things can do it, of course, but in a collective way, in a unique way, it can question our sense of time and how we even exist within time. And I learned this, you know, through working on Philip Glass's operas, that, you know, Philip's music, you know, it can be very long if you don't take the audience into this different perception of time. If you manage to do it, the operas go like that because people have been taken into this other zone. And I think this piece, you know, on one level is a discussion about time. And it's called The Hours. And that there's something beautiful about this idea that Virginia almost called her novel The Hours, but she didn't. And then Michael Cunningham did call his opera The Hours. So it's almost like she played a part in, you know, this. That's a statement about time in itself. And I think it visits some really clear moments where you go, oh, this is a naturalistic scene happening right now. And then swiftly it goes into this sense of time where time is not connected in a linear way. The characters themselves are connected all across time. And these ghosts of these previous women are present with the women in these different eras. So in the moment, that's my little riff on how it discusses time and why it's called The Hours. You know, there's a thing that happens before the opera. So as we're approaching the opera, it starts, and the curtain's up. And we're in, like, I would say in consensus reality time before the opera starts. And then the curtain will go up and we're taken into this other time zone. And that can only happen if everybody in the audience connects to what's happening on stage and we collectively go into that. So it seems to me like a beautiful piece that manages to have a discussion about time that's maybe sometimes an intellectual discussion about time, but actually it's an experiential discussion about time, which again is something that opera can do. So this is why I've fallen in love with opera. I think it can discuss things that can only be discussed by opera. You know, it can talk about these things that one would say are ineffable.
The biggest questions in life.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time, so to
Are
wrap-
we?
I think we are. I don't have a producer in my ear tonight, but my
it was an
broadcasters-
hour.
It was an hour. For our final question, well, I'd like to ask our performers, Yannick, Joyce, Kelly, and Renee. You have been at the top of the musical world as interpreters for many years. Your experience is vast, and you know what makes art work, what makes it powerful. For each of you, what makes this opera that we're about to experience in 2 weeks' time so powerful? Yannick?
I mean, a lot has been said about it in this hour, I think so eloquently by everyone on this stage. Art, my goodness, we could open that up. But to me, what works is when, a little bit like we're talking about the craft and the genius and all of this, how it's well thought. There's this craft, there's the way of constructing a piece, knowing well orchestrated, well written, well sung, well paced, well everything. But then, this is all at the service of an incredible message. Emotional. That's very important. It's all about emotion. It's all about saying something. Some operas, you know, are intellectual and they are great for it, but there's also a little bit more, in my opinion, forgettable. And in this one, I believe that there, and I felt this with all the cast, some of the cast who was here already, Kelly, Renee were there, and some others, and the Philadelphia Orchestra musicians, that something's happening here. Something just touches us beyond, because it stimulates our mind and just goes straight to our core and our heart. And as the one responsible in the end of controlling time during an opera,
Yes.
I have to say that the sense of freedom that I love to create with performers is all written in the music. There's always this inexorable thing that's going, and yet there's so much flexibility. In tribute to some of the older operas, I mean, and I look at Joyce, who's done a lot of Baroque operas, there's this feeling when, especially for Virginia Woolf, when the piano takes over, almost like a harpsichord or continuo, and the proportion, and I'm going to finish my answer on this, the proportions of it. There's the dramatic arc. And I remember my mentor, Giulini, was saying a great opera has to be a great libretto, great music, and great dramatic arc. Need I say more? You know, I believe that great libretto, great music, and great dramatic arc. That's what it is, and that's maybe what's the most difficult to get, this dramatic arc and timing. So it's good when it's called The Hours to get the timing right.
Joyce, Kelly, and Renee, would you like to add to that quickly before we go?
I'm good. I think I
Okay,
talked a lot
okay.
about.
I'll share one thing of why what I think sets this piece apart, and sort of coming up on what everybody has been talking about in the pandemic. And my sense of time is I've become a lot more possessive of my time, and I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste my time, which means also I don't want to put resource and time into the world for things that are forgettable or don't really go into the heart of what I think we need to be looking at as a society and a community. And that's why it feels so good to be inside and swimming inside this piece. And I'll give you an example. On this Sitzprobe day where the chorus was weeping behind us, they only experienced Act 2. They don't even know what Act 1 is yet as an entirety. And I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's a moment about 7 minutes in when you're going to get one of those Renee moments that we all know, we all love, and it's just like, it's the same today as it was every time I've heard her. And that, for me, is when the knife goes in the center of the heart, in the best way, in that operatic way, like, oh, it feels so good to be so, like this. And then it's about 2 hours of just a really slow twist. I mean, and it just doesn't let up. It's dramatic arc. And so even the chorus, not even having experienced this yet, somebody grabbed me in the afternoon and they said, I'm glad you warned us because I wasn't ready. But I left that rehearsal and I went to everybody in the building that I needed to see and I told them I loved them. I was compelled to tell them I loved them. And I thought, that's something worth my spending my time on. And that's what I think this piece has the potential to evoke and compel in all of us. Yeah, that's worth it.
Kelly, do you have anything to?
We can leave it at that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here and for our incredible panelists. We are so excited for the premiere of The Hours, and I hope I can see you on November 22nd. And until then, be well with all your hours of your day. Thank you.